Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a colder pattern for the eastern and central United States, which is going to be taking place over the next couple of weeks. So right as we're starting to turn into November, we'll start to go into a much colder pattern, and it'll definitely start to feel like it is November. We're going to be a couple degrees below average for most spots, and snow will even start to become possible. It's already starting to happen in parts of the Rockies, but over the next week or two we might even start to see some of that snow, albeit in a lighter form, in parts of the upper Great Lakes, the interior Northeast, and then maybe even by the second or third week of November, we could see that spread into parts of the lower Great Lakes, the Northeast, Ohio Valley. Probably closer to the third week of November is when that would happen. So we're off to a fairly late start when it comes to the temperatures, but in terms of snowfall, it looks like we could see a lot of areas get their first snow maybe a few days earlier than normal. Now let's get right into it, and let's start off with your current weather photo of the day. This was sent in by Wayne from Brick Township, New Jersey. This photo on the right hand side of the screen was from Forge Pond. So it's right next to the ocean right here, so it's just a few miles, as you can see on the left hand side of your screen. And this is a really great photo. I'm not sure if this is a sunrise or a sunset, but either way you can see the reflection of that on the pond right over here. So that's probably one of my favorite parts of the photo, is that this was that you can see the reflection clearly on the lake. This was not taken recently. It was taken actually last year from this area, but still it is a great photo. And even if you have any older photos that you guys want to send in of any weather event, and not necessarily just a weather event, maybe it's a cool cloud, again a cool sunrise or sunset, and especially once we get snowstorms and things like that, if you want to send in your storm photos, feel free to do so, and you'll be featured in the beginning of the video. And you can tell this is in the winter time, or at least in the later or the second half of the fall, because all the leaves are off the trees by this point. So I'm thinking probably November or December is when this was taken, maybe even in January or February, but some winter or fall month is when this was probably taken from. And then you can also see, again, the water meeting the land right here, where you have that some of the rocks and the sand. So overall, I think it's a really great photo. I really love how you can see the reflection clearly on the lake, and it's a really well done photo from Wayne. So thank you for sending that in. Again, if you guys have any of your photos that you want to send in, just send over an email with a general location of where it was taken from to elitheweatherguyyt at gmail.com. Again, it does not have to be as specific as exactly where it was taken from, but even if it's just a town name or just a part of the state, so you could say maybe a northern part, or just for an example, you could say northern Ohio, or you could say southern Florida, or whatever part of the state you took that from. Nothing specific, just so that it gives us a good idea of generally where that was taken from. So here's a look at what the current National Weather Service page looks like, and you can see it is actually quite quiet for today, other than a few flood watches in parts of the Northeast and a couple of wind advisories scattered across the country. We really don't have a lot going on, but yesterday it was actually fairly active in terms of the weather. We saw a lot of rain and snow, especially in the Northwest. Yesterday we had a high temperature tied at about 95 degrees between three areas: 13 miles east-southeast of Mecca, California, 17 miles east of Brawley, California, and 13 miles west of Winter Haven, California, where they all got up to 95 degrees, and those were all in the southeastern corner of California, in more of those desert areas. Once you get basically east of that little mountain chain, which is east of Los Angeles, once you get basically east of here, you start to get into a lot more desert environment, where it does get quite warm in the afternoon and quite chilly at night. Yesterday we had a low temperature of 11 degrees in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and in Antero Reservoir, Colorado. Highest rainfall report was 6.37 inches in May Creek, Washington. The highest snowfall report was in St. Mary, Montana, where they got 5 inches of snowfall. So Here's a look at the upper air map, and we're going to just quickly move through this because it will give you a good idea of generally what we're expecting. The blue and the green colors, that's going to indicate low pressure. The orange and the red colors, that's going to indicate high pressure. So that's generally how you would read the map. And in most scenarios, not always, but in most scenarios, the blue colors would indicate that you would have somewhat of a colder troughing pattern. Meanwhile, these orange or red colors would indicate in most scenarios that you would be in a bit of a warmer pattern. So in this case, this is for tomorrow morning. You can tell that we do have a little bit of a ridge up through the northwest. We then have troughing along the eastern United States, and that's why it is actually going to be fairly cold for Halloween. We're looking at a lot of areas where you're going to have your trick-or-treating times down into the 40s and the 30s for a lot of these spots. So maybe you want to bring in maybe just a jacket underneath your costume or whatever you're going out with. So it will just be a little bit chilly. In terms of actual bad weather, it doesn't look like we're going to have too many issues with rain, especially in the eastern United States. But you will definitely have maybe some chillier temperatures, especially compared to the fairly mild October. So again, this first week of really cold temperatures is going to be a shock to the system, even if it's only 1 or 2 degrees below normal, because when you're, let's say, 10 degrees above normal for the entire month of October, and you finally get maybe 2 or 3 degrees below normal, that's still a maybe 15 or 20 degree temperature shift compared to the entire month of October as a whole. So it is going to feel quite cold compared to what you were recently dealing with just maybe a week or two ago. Here to be by Monday. So we see this trough kind of consolidate itself. So we have that first little batch of low pressure, which was down here, that's moved to the east, and now we see this bigger area over the upper Great Lakes, which is really holding together over that area. So here's your general flow of cold air. So the Great Lakes locked in some rather cold air, which is originating from northern Canada. So here you can follow the lines and these little contours on the screen, and you can see that it's coming straight out of northern Canada and then moving into the eastern United States. Now, if we move this on, you can see that little area of low pressure is going to be met with high pressure to its west. So one of the reasons that we have such a deep trough into the eastern United States by this point is because you have such a very strong high pressure system up in western Canada. So you have high pressure which is going all the way up to about 50 or 60 degrees north latitude, and so that's going to mean that you're going to have a fairly big rebound on the eastern edge of that. So because we have such extreme warm temperatures in the west, we're going to have fairly extreme, not necessarily extreme, but fairly cold temperatures in the eastern United States and eastern Canada. So when you have a really amplified pattern like this, you're going to see big extremes on one side of the country compared to the other. So with such warm temperatures in western Canada, of course, that is going to mean that you have to have kind of a rebound. You need to reach equilibrium, and the only way to really do that is to have another area of really strong low pressure bringing in colder temperatures just to its east. Now here would be by Wednesday morning, and you can see that we have that trough digging into, again, still the eastern United States. You have that high pressure system, which is moving a little bit further to the east in Canada. It's not actually going to be that cold, that warm actually in the western United States, but it will be quite warm up into western Canada. So if you live in the west, you're only going to be about 10 degrees above normal, and same in the east. It's not going to be awfully cold. You're going to be maybe 5 or 10 degrees below normal. The bigger extremes are going to be up in Canada, where you might be experiencing maybe 10, 15, 20 degree Fahrenheit above normal. So that would be closer to 10 degrees or 7 to 10 degrees Celsius above normal. So it will feel fairly warm over those spots. Now what we're starting to see is more of a complex setup as we get to Thursday. So we have a few different features up here. We have one that's heading into the west. We have another low pressure system into the central plains, one more out near Nova Scotia, and then another one in James Bay, Canada, with a high pressure system up in central Canada and another one down in the Pacific. So here's your setup. You have, again, low pressure here, low pressure here, low pressure here, and low pressure here, with high pressure here and here. So this is our setup, and it is, again, quite confusing. Even if you are used to looking at some of these maps, it can be confusing to track 6 different systems all at once. So if we draw out the lines here, you can see that we have generally an area of troughing into the eastern United States, and then you have that ridging into the western United States. So it is, again, quite a complex system. Really, it can be broken down into having one area of troughing and one area of ridging to the west. These 3 systems are kind of circulating around each other. So when one of them moves to the east, the other one will move to the north, and the next one will move to the south, kind of completing that circle and that cycle of low pressure. So here's your setup. Again, when this system right here moves to the east, this one is going to move to the north, and that one is going to move to the south. So they're kind of filling in the space for each other. So you're going to have a constant flow of colder air into the east. You also have strong northerly winds coming down over the Midwest, and if you live in the east, you're going to have some fairly strong easterly winds, which is not necessarily not necessarily the warmest of winds. So overall, including the windshield temperatures, or including how it will actually feel, it might be into the 20s with those feels like temperatures, especially if you get a rather windy day. Here's November 5th, which is Friday. You can see now we're dealing with this original system, which was originally here, moved up into eastern Canada. We saw this next one move down and kind of combine with the other one down into the eastern United States. So now we have a stronger low pressure system in the Tennessee Valley. Now what the European model does is actually bring snow to some of these areas right here. I'm not expecting that, and that's why it has that trough digging into the east. I'm not going to forecast that. Even if we're within, let's say, 6 or 7 days, or even 5 days, and it's still showing that, I'm probably not going to cover it until we're within 3 or 4, because we've seen a lot of times where a lot of these channels like to pump up huge snowstorms, and it's 7 days out still, and then you come to the actual event, and you're dealing with maybe, I would say, 20% or 40% of the actual snowfall that was forecasted. Even if it does actually snow, it's probably not going to be as strong as what the European model is showing, and what some of the GFS models, what the GFS model is showing, and what the Canadian model is showing. So you can look at all of these different models. They have completely different outcomes on individual snow events. So as of right now, I'm going to keep the precipitation or the snow forecast to a minimum, unless we're within 5, or especially when we're within 3 days is when I'll start to get a little bit more confident. But right now, 6-7 days out, I have very little confidence in whatever the European model is trying to stir up here. The thing that will probably stay true, and the thing that I agree with the European model with, is that we're probably going to have some colder air over this time of year. So again, today's video is mainly about the temperature. In the latter half of the video, in the last few minutes, we will talk about briefly where some snow cover might start to appear, but we're going to talk about that more in a broader sense. Now here's the actual low temperatures, and we're just going to quickly go through this. Here's Sunday, so this is Halloween, and you can see that we have 30s and 20s into the Midwest, but you get down into the eastern United States, still rather warm. You're dealing with low temperatures in the 40s and the 50s. So really nothing that cold up to this point. As we move on to November 1st, again, that pushes a little bit further to the east, so it is starting to get chillier, especially for areas like Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Iowa. So you guys are starting to get in on the colder temperatures. We move it on to November 2nd, so Tuesday, and you can see that we have a lot of areas that are now getting in on some rather chilly temperatures. So now we have basically an east-west line, which you can draw basically at the same latitude as, I would say, Maryland. And if you draw that line, anywhere north is dealing with somewhat chilly temperatures. Anywhere south dealing with milder temperatures, but still nothing that's going to be too warm either. So fairly neutral temperatures down further to the south. As we get to November 3rd, again, that colder line of air is starting to filter on further to the south. So for a lot of you guys, if you're asking when your first frost is going to be, unless you live in an area that's in the southern United States or the southeast, I would say your first frost, if you haven't already gotten in it, is probably coming sometime Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. There's just a fairly good shot that you're probably going to have your first frost on those days if you have not seen it it already. In terms of first snowfall, you can of course ask me those questions in the comments. I'm not necessarily going to give you a specific answer because personally I don't know when the first snowfall is going to be to the exact date, but I can give you a general time. Right now I'm thinking mid-November is when a lot of you guys, mid-November to late November is when a lot of you guys who are asking those questions will probably get your first snowfall, because by that point it will be cold enough in the averages that you could definitely get a snow event, and you don't need it to be 10 or 15 degrees below normal to see that snowfall by that point. So I'm thinking late November, snow will become a lot more usual over a lot of spots. As we move on to November 4th, you can see 20s dropping down into the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, and even if you live again in parts of the southern plains, so even areas like the panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, dealing with some temperatures getting into the at least the lower 40s and maybe even some upper 30s, which is fairly chilly for this time of year in those spots. And then we move this on to November 5th. Look at that. You're dealing with rather cold temperatures all the way down into the south and also into the southeast, maybe with the exception of the coastal southeast, but a lot of those areas dealing with maybe some colder temperatures. And unfortunately, that might put an end to the growing season, which for a lot of you guys has actually been a little bit longer than normal. So that's been good news for some people, especially who have farms. But it looks like probably by, I would say, the 5th, the 6th, 7th, by that point, it probably will start to have to wrap up in parts of the south, because you will start to get some frost a little bit more frequently than what's been happening, especially through October, where it's been fairly mild. Looking at for November 6th, which is Saturday, you can see we have 30s over much of the eastern United States. And again, the validity of this, we don't know, especially once we get to day 6, day 7, day 8. We don't know if this is going to be 100% correct. Each model has its own different spin, but most of them are at least agreeing that we're going to have some colder temperatures into the east. We're not sure if that's going to get all the way as far south as what the European model is showing, although it is definitely a possibility. If we look at the 6 to 10 day outlook, you can see that the Climate Prediction Center even is hopping aboard with, and really when you see this, you know that it's probably going to be a fairly cold next 6 to 10 days. This is from the 4th through the 8th. The Climate Prediction Center, I really don't like their forecast all that much, because when it is cold, they really a lot of times are putting up mild temperatures, especially in their winter outlooks or the fall outlooks. You can basically just copy and paste their winter outlook from this year to the one that they put out last year and the one that they put out the year before and the year before. They basically put in the same exact forecast of really warm temperatures over the entire country, and then they just take a guess, 50-50 chance that they'll be right on that. So I really don't look at their forecast all that much. I think the 6 to 10 day, 8 to 14 day outlook can be useful at some points, but when it comes to their 3 to 4 week outlook, their 1 month outlook, 2 month outlook, NOAA's outlooks on all of those tend to be warmer than normal, even if we have fairly good assumptions that it is going to be colder than normal. For example, I believe their November forecast that they put out back in September and October, even when I was saying that we're probably not going to be dealing with a warmer pattern that lasts all the way into November, I was saying even back in late September and October that I think November will be colder, and you can just go back and look at my winter forecast to see that they were still showing extremely mild temperatures for then. So personally, I don't like their longer range forecast, but just taking a look at their 6 to 10 day outlook, even if they do have a warm bias, they aren't showing it here because they are indicating some colder temperatures. So even the Climate Prediction Center hopping on the bandwagon that it will probably be at least a cold next 6 to 10 days. And if you were to look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, that also covers the eastern United States in some colder temperatures. Not to look at specifics here, but here's the European Ensemble model snowfall guidance. So this is 51 models and then finding the average of all of this. So this is over the next 15 days, so this takes you right through November 14th, and you can see there are a few things that we are noticing. A lot of that snowpack starts to build up into Canada, which is important to how the winter actually plays out in the United States. If you had no snowpack up in Canada and you were getting even cold air coming in from that area, if that's your source of cold air, which in the United States it is, then you need snowpack to reflect the sunlight, because again, the color white does reflect about I believe, about 90% of sunlight. So that's why if you go in the summertime and you touch the surface of a car that's painted black, it's really, really warm, and you pretty much go right back and you make sure that you don't touch it again. And that's because black absorbs the most of the sunlight, so it's capturing in that heat. But the color white does not do that. So if you were to touch a white car in the summer, it would still probably be fairly warm, but not as warm as the color black. So the snow, because it is of course the color white, it is going to be reflecting about 90% of that sunlight, and that means that it will be naturally colder in Canada if you have a snowpack on the ground. Even if it's just a few inches of snow, it does not have to be a ton to reflect that sunlight. So the fact that there is some snow building up there is good news. It means that your source of air will be a little bit chillier. You can also see that we are probably going to be dealing with some snowfall developing up into the west. Also, the northern plains, the Great Lakes, will probably start to get their first snowfall probably before the middle part of the month. And then also the northeast, I would say, especially if you live inland of the coast by about, I would say, once you get to just northwest of that I-95 corridor, there is a fairly good shot that by the middle of the month, you'll at least have seen a little bit of snowfall. Especially if you're maybe a few dozen miles northwest of that corridor, you could definitely be seeing some snowfall. Now, again, don't look at any specifics because this is not really going to tell you anything in terms of specifics. I'm not looking at any of these numbers for a forecast 15 days out. It's really not that useful for that, but it is at least a good sign that you could definitely see some snowfall. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for when you're going to be seeing snowfall because, of course, how mild October has been, and right now with how November's looking to start off, this could definitely be the month where you get a decent thumping of snowfall early on in the season, and let's hope that can extend into December in time for the Christmas holidays. So that would be definitely a cool thing if we get some snow on Christmas. I know I definitely want that, and I'm sure a lot of you guys also want that, maybe just a couple inches on the ground. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you have any questions or comments, just leave a comment down below, and I'll be responding within a couple hours of you posting that, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.